Today's guest is Trace Brannon, owner of Brannon Brothers Construction. He's a Christian, he's a husband, he's a father, he's a Marine veteran, and he's a man who built a thriving concrete business from the ground up. Today we dive into the world of contracting, the struggles of entrepreneurship, and how his faith fuels his purpose. Trace, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys, for having me.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So we want to start out by asking you, where'd you grow up and what was your childhood like?
Okay. So, yeah, I grew up in Ponce de Leon, or actually a little town called Prosperity, up on 81 north of Ponce de Leon. I had three brothers, half brothers, but I was raised by my mom. She was a single mom. I had two good great grandparents on her side. Grew up normal childhood for Holmes County, hunting, fishing, playing baseball, basketball, and trying to stay out of trouble. And yeah, so that was the early life, going to church. Best friend, his dad, Stacy Stafford, he was our pastor growing up. So he pastored at Leonia, which was just up the road. So we had a great youth group up there. So, had a close knit, good bunch of guys, kind of family, like friendship, to be around, good core, grow up with.
Where'd you go to high school at?
Ponce de Leon. I went to pre-K there and graduated there in 2014.
What happened after high school?
So after high school, or let me back up a little bit. In high school, worked. There's a local taxidermist. He's like a father figure to me, Mike McKinley. That was my first legitimate job. So during the week or after school, I was mounting animals, skinning animals, and I joke with him all the time. He would pay me, but I tell him all the time, he wouldn't have to pay me. I was just interested. I didn't have anything else going. I loved being there. But then, so about my senior year, started thinking about what's life got for me planned, or what do I have planned? And I started thinking about the Air Force. Had two brothers that were in the Marines at the time, and they had got injured in the Marine Corps, so I was kind of like, oh well, let's go into the Air Force and kind of not do as hard as what they did. And they joked with me and said, hey, look, if you go in the Marine Corps, or if you go in the Air Force, we'll make fun of you for the rest of your life, and as Marines do. And so that was the plan. Unfortunately, I had some waivers that I had to go through to get that. So in the meantime, after graduating, I went to work pouring concrete. Worked for a couple companies, a local to here, and then some from North Carolina, and just bounced around. Really, just whoever would pay me more money and I get more hours, I would do. And then the Marine Corps process kind of sped up a little bit, and I joined the Marine Corps in 2016, and went to Parris Island. And I almost cringe when you say Marine Corps veteran, because it's I don't necessarily consider myself that. It was a hard situation, so it was joined the Marine Corps, gung ho, had a Force Recon contract that I'd signed before to go to boot camp, and go to boot camp. Within boot camp's 3 months long, so 2 months in, end up shattering my tibia, dislocating my kneecap, tearing my left hip flexor, and so after that, I'm like, what do I do? I haven't technically finished boot camp. I made it right to the very end, if you will, but they're like, what do you do? And so they put me into a program, and figuring there was 22 of all the kids that ever go to Parris Island go to this program, because it's a freak situation, because you had made it so far, so they can't really kick you out, but you have no skill set and you can't go on to your next school. Mm. And so technically graduated boot camp, but in a sense didn't, if that makes sense. I don't feel like I earned it because I got hurt. And then my job was to watch basically and oversee suicidal recruits that don't make it through boot camp for the remaining, I think it was a little over a year, till they ended up giving us a med board process and retire you out, basically. So it's tough. There's guys in the Marine Corps that actually are veterans that deserve the recognition and do things, like both my brothers, both of those guys, infantry Marines, did the thing, combat veterans, combat injured veterans. So I don't consider myself any kind of degree to those guys, but I mean, yeah, I did it. I joined it, and got medically retired out, but just under some weird circumstances. So that was a hard transition for my life, like in general, like fate, like what's left in my future, what am I going to do? Because I'd signed a 5x3. Plan was to do 20 years in the Marines, and then that's like you're 20, 21 years old, and they're like, hey, no, you can't do that. And that's the only job you can't quit, right? The military. Mm-hmm. I can go work at any construction company and get ticked off with the boss and leave. The Marine Corps you can't. And so I was like, dude, I'm a failure. Like the one thing that I couldn't really quit at, I failed at. And so I started questioning my faith. I mean, I was a Christian, way before the Marine Corps, back in high school, got saved, but like it was like, God, why would you do this? I'd trained. I was in the best shape of my life. There's guys that don't even really care that they're in the Marine Corps and they're making it, and I'm like the top of my class and I'm injured, can't do anything about it. So thank God the Bible was there with me. So the only book I was allowed to bring to Parris Island was the Bible. So I did a lot of reading and trying to find flaws in the Bible, which I couldn't, thank God. And that's, I told God there, I was like, if you can help me get to see the light and see what my future is going to hold, I'll follow you for the rest of my life. And so that was the kind of going forward from then. After getting out of the Marine Corps, my wife at the time, we had dated before the Marines, and we kind of rekindled things when I got out. And so she had got accepted to Auburn University, and she was like, hey, look, I'm going to Auburn. And I'd moved back. I was staying with my mom a little bit, and I was like, I'm not going to stay here. I have nothing going for me. At that point, most of my friends, they're at the 21, 22-year-old age, and so they're either moved off or they're not doing anything. They're doing drugs or something like that. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I don't want to hang around that, mm-hmm. and I don't know what I'm going to do moving off, so I guess I'll go to Auburn with her. So move up there, met a guy through the Marine Corps. A friend of a friend in the Marines told me to meet a guy named Mike Rayburn, and he introduced me. We went and ate lunch, and he's like, basically, what do you want to do? What do you know how to do? And I told him concrete, man. And so at the time, he had just sold his company, Rayburn Construction, and he had a lot of connections in Auburn, so he got me a job up there. And at that point, like in high school, pre-Marine Corps, I was pouring concrete. I knew how to finish concrete, but I didn't care about it. You know what I mean? Like, I knew how to do it, but it was like the really childish mindset of like not asking questions, like just doing what I'm supposed to do to get paid. And so at that point, it was like, hey, my plan for my life got canceled. So if I'm going to do this, I need to learn like the aspects of it that matter. So I started asking why. Like, why are we digging a 2-foot footer? Why are we tying steel? Why are we doing this formation, or all these questions? And so I started really maturing in the management role of construction. And so I worked my way up in that position, and kind of sidetracked along that time. My hours with that company were pretty easy. So working 7 to 3, Monday through Friday, occasional Saturday when we would pour. So I was able to it was when Marketplace, I think, had just come out. So I'd post on Marketplace, pole barns, patios, driveways. And I went and got bull floats, random hand tools that I could use to do these things. And then after work at 3 o'clock, I would go form up a driveway. Mm-hmm. And then on Saturday, I'd schedule concrete and have a couple guys that work with me. I'm like, hey, do you want to make some money? Mm-hmm. And we'd go pour it, and I'd make about what I made in the week in basically a day plus the afternoons. And so that was I guess the start of the business mindset, if you will. And it kind of just progressed through. Was up there for about 2 years and doing that, and the VA started calling, and they were like, look, you're not putting any emphasis on fixing your knee. And I don't know exactly how it worked, but I got the impression that if I didn't go at least try to have the surgery on my knee because I hadn't had surgery in the Marine Corps. And so I was like, I got the impression if I didn't at least try to get it fixed, that they were going to take benefits away or something like that. And so I was like, okay, I need to sit down and think about this surgery. And honestly, it was a hard transition because I was making good money, but knee surgery is going to put you out for 4 months, and I worked in construction. Yeah. So I can't sit on my butt and do construction. And so that's that's when me and my wife, we kind of sat down and we talked about like, hey, look, do we do this or do we not? And there was some issues with the company I was working for as far as like they wanted you to have like a college degree, and kind of flip to that is I was training the guys that they were hiring with the college degrees to do their job. And so I was like kind of not seeing eye to eye on that aspect of it. So I was like, I'm going to go ask the owner, you know, talk to him and, you know, see how it goes. And so told him I was thinking about having knee surgery. Would I have a job when I come back? And he explained to me that, yeah, he would hire me. And then I just kind of asked, I was like, look, you know, what is it going to take to move up in this company? And he explained to me, he was like, hey, man, you know, you need a construction science degree to get to where you want to be. And I didn't say anything to him. I just took that. But in the back of my mind, I was kind of like, I don't need a piece of paper to tell you what I know. And that's kind of how I've been my whole life. And so, did that and went and had the surgery and started, you know, thinking seriously about the business and what I was going to do. And do I do it by myself? Do I get a partner involved? You know, how does that work? And long story short, now I'm glad everything worked out the way it did. Me and my brother, we had kind of sat down and talked, and we decided between the two of us that he didn't know anything about concrete at the time. I was the concrete knowledge, but he was really good at managing money. And so we were like, hey, let's do this thing. I'll show you the ropes of concrete. You manage the taxes and the schedules and estimates, and that's what we'll do. And, you know, it worked while it did. And, again, not to, you know, say anything or ruffle feathers, but that didn't work out. For about a year in, it didn't work out. That's what I'll say. And don't mean any disrespect to anybody in that, but we separated. The name of the company, of course, was Brannon Brothers. And so it was me. I was sole ownership at that point moving forward. And I wish him nothing but the best, of course, in everything he does. But it didn't work out. And it allowed me to kind of really figure out the business. Because, like, the times we were – and it's nothing to do with him, but the time we were in business that first year, a lot of people I see – and I posted this on Facebook not too long ago, but a lot of people think that they are in business because they're doing it. But if they're not the ones doing the work, actually, they don't have anything. Mm-hmm. And I had a mentor. Me and my wife were going to church in RCC over in Marion, and we still go there. But a guy named Art Kimbrough at the time, about this whole transition between me and brother, it was hard with it being family and all. And he's like, hey, what do you do? And I told him, I was like, I own a construction company. He's like, oh, so you're a business owner? I was like, yes, sir. He's like, how many employees you got? And I go through it. And at this point, I think I had like 5 or 6. And he's asking me like what my job duties were. And I was telling him, you know, estimating, picking up the checks, pouring the concrete, doing everything. He's like, okay. He's like, can I tell you something without offending you? And I was like, yes, sir, absolutely. And he goes, you know, you said you're a business owner. When I asked you, I said, yes, sir. He's like, you don't own a business. The business owns you. Yeah. And I kind of took offense to that. I was like, you know, all this work I'm putting in, sleepless nights, and you're telling me I'm no better than an employee somewhere. You know, that hurt. But it was the best thing I could have ever gotten at that point, because it was like, he's right. You know, if I'm sacrificing time away from my family, I'm sacrificing time from, you know, doing what I want to do this. And at the end of the day, if I don't show up on Monday, nothing gets done. I don't make money. And so that was a big deal. And so that's when my mind started turning on, okay, what is business? How does that work? I want to be known not for Trace Brannon, the concrete guy. I want to be known for Trace Brannon, like a business owner, or, you know, a guy who thinks outside the box. And so that's when that kind of mindset started shifting. And, you know, I started, you know, looking after good employees and what I could pay them, you know, like. And it was there. I'll tell you, there's the first guy that I ever had that just come to me. His name was Aurelio Salas Lopez. He still works for me to this day. He's the biggest blessing I've ever had. He come to me. We'd used a guy to help us kind of supplement some labor on a big slab. And the guy I'd used come to me. He's like, hey, are you looking for full-time help? I was like, absolutely. You know, we're in this journey of right now I need, all the full-time help I can get. And he's like, well, the guy that was helping me, or you saw helping me, his name's, we call him Casillas, his name's Aurelio. He said he's looking for full-time work. And so I was like, well, yeah, send him my way. And long story short, I went to him. I was like, hey, if you want to work full time, what is it going to take? And he told me the salary, and it was like double what I was paying myself. And I was like, oh God, me and my wife were like, okay, I'm paying myself this. This guy's wanting this, but is he worth that? And can somebody else afford to pay him that? Yeah. So do we pass up on him and the opportunity to have a guy like him because we don't know if we can really afford him, or do we try to figure it out and just we might either have to come out of our personal money every once in a week to pay this guy? And so we prayed about it, thought about it, and we're like, yeah, let's go with it. And man, he come on, dude. I had about 6 months worth of work scheduled out. He did it in about 2.5 months. And so, dude, it was an awesome hire. And everything kind of went from there. And I don't want to keep rambling on about that, but that's what got us to the point of start really thinking about big business. And now that was probably 4 years ago when all that kind of went through. And I had 5 employees, and now we have 24 employees.
Wow.
We were just doing kind of under $1 million, back then in revenue, and this year I think we're projecting 8.5. So,
Wow.
I mean,
That's great.
Not that matters, but it kind of it's cool
growing.
to look back and see
how far you've come.
Absolutely.
So when you were in high school starting out in concrete, were you doing mostly residential, or what was that?
No, so that's a great question. I worked for Light Moon. They were out of Bonifay at one point, but they moved to Dothan. We did actually one of the first jobs I did with them guys were we did a lot of Fort Rooker work, but then and I can't remember contract wise, but I know we worked on the middle school, the new Bonifay K8.
Yeah.
We poured all the footers out there, so that's the type of work we did.
Yeah.
We did the Headland yeast plant, so it was all commercial / industrial. So that was the difference, I think, a lot in my mindset, because I feel like, and no offense to anybody in residential construction, but for me, when I first got my start in my business, that's all I could get was residential, because nobody's going to trust you to do a commercial.
From the start?
Yeah, from the start, right?
Yeah.
Because you have no past performance for your business. And for me, it was like residential was almost like disrespectful to me. Like, because I had my skill set was from day one was commercial, big jobs. And I'm being asked to pour little jobs. And I didn't mean that like it sounds really kind of disrespectful, but I appreciate every job anybody's ever given me. But from that, like, oh, I know what I'm doing on the commercial. Why isn't somebody asking me to do commercial rather than residential?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So
So when you were going from the journey of when you started out to having to do residential, how did you get into the commercial aspect?
So it was tough, man. I tried. I'd call commercial. Like, I'll tell you the secret, and anybody out there listening, like, as far as starting a business in any aspect, what I would do, and I joke around about this, but my guys that's been with me a while can tell you, if we say we did a residential job in Crestview, right? Once we got to a stopping point, like we'd poured out the slab or finished the slab, I'd go on Google and I'd type in commercial general contractors near me, and I'd come up with like 30 numbers. And I'd sit there and I'd write all those numbers down, either on my phone or on a piece of paper. And that day, like right then, I would call all 30 of those numbers. And I would do that every time we were on a job site, from Crestview to Pensacola to Ponce de Leon, Bonifay. And I mean, I'd tell you, 9 times out of 10, I wouldn't even get a call back, wouldn't even get an answer. But every once in a while, one would call. And that's what happened. One guy, a guy named Paul Sims out of Bay County, answered the phone. He said, I'll give you a shot. And that was residential, but he had a lot of residential. And so to answer the question how to go from residential to commercial, he was a legitimate residential contractor, been in the game for a long time. And so we started doing good work for him. And then, his guys or friends that he knew would hear, like, who's your concrete guy? And they'd tell him. And so not necessarily us going after commercial, but like, say, a guy who did commercial, a commercial concrete guy that they were going to use backed out on them. And they were like caught between a rock and a hard place, and they say, hey, Trace, can you come help us out? And then, okay, we did a good job. And then, now we got a commercial guy. And then the next guy, and it just kind of organically went from that point. Yeah. So that was.
What were some of the biggest challenges you faced in the beginning of your journey of starting a business?
Oh man, I mean, I started this thing with $7,000 on a personal credit card. I had zero money, nothing. And it took me 13 months to pay that $7,000 off. And so every job like we do, and I'm sure some of my customers that still stick with us or still watch us from way back then, I would come in, I'd bid the job, and I'd tell them, look, up front, concrete is going to cost $6,000. So when the concrete truck gets here, y'all are paying for that concrete. I don't have $6,000 to even pay, but so they would pay for all the material up front, and I would do the work, and then in the end we'd settle up on my labor side. And so that's how I started the business and even got any traction. And so the biggest obstacle was, of course, money and cash flow, like figuring out, if there was ever somebody who owed me a check and they said they were going to pay me on Friday and they didn't. I mean, there was a point in time where we could have went bankrupt over $500, the business would have ended. And so, money, of course, would have been, number one at the start. And still is. I mean, cash flow is a big deal, but the more years you get into business now, you start getting relationships with banks and you start getting lines of credit and stuff like that. So you can save yourself in those situations sometimes.
At what point did you realize you wanted to be a business owner? Like when you were growing up and stuff, did you ever think like you'd be a business owner?
No, absolutely not. I joke with people all the time. Like I guess the reason I started the business, looking back at it now, is I feel like I had an old soul or an old mind at a young age. And so I wanted the respect of like a foreman or a superintendent when I was 17, 18. And I mean, I didn't deserve it, but I wanted it. Mm-hmm. And so if anyone would have given me a leadership position at 21, 22 years old and like put some faith in me, I would have never been a business owner. Like I started my business truly to make my own path or give my own self that responsibility because nobody else would. Mm-hmm. And so then you start getting into it and figuring it out, and it's like you start getting a little confidence, and it's like you start understanding, like I wouldn't say, of course, I don't know, I learn something new every day, but you start figuring out the problems, and you start realizing it's not that hard. Mm-hmm. The times or the circumstances are, but like you can get through anything. And so that's, I guess, why I got into business or stay in the business, I guess.
Did you have any mentors that you learned a lot from that you would go to for advice, and how did they help you navigate through those seasons? Yeah,
so I've had tons of people, tons of men, of course, that are great mentors, great leaders that I've looked up to. And I mean, anybody that says they've done something completely by themselves, they're a liar. Like I might have started this business and did all that, but like if it wasn't for people believing in me or helping me, I wouldn't be where I'm at. But I'd say different ones. Not to name drop, but like Mike McKinley, like I said, the taxidermist. He was one of a man. He was a man of God. He showed me like how to just. He had a taxidermy business, so he had a business. So seeing him interact with his customers, I guess I learned that from him. And then where to give the glory to, like when you have good weeks and good bad days. I still kind of reflect on him for that. But then the big business, I would say the Art Kimbrough. He was the president of Chamber of Commerce, and I think he owns a bunch of funeral homes. So it was a good point in time. And then Stacy Stafford, being a pastor, I could bounce off him some stuff. And then Paul Smith, our pastor at RCC, they're all, I can call any one of those guys still to this day if I had a question or, worry, and they'd still help me, or give me some advice.
Mm-hmm. How, since you started the business, I guess, how has your mindset shifted?
Man, that's a great one. So, I mean, first off, it shifted immensely. I mean, but how, just the way I look at the world, you know what I mean? Like literally, I'm 29 years old, from Holmes County, raised by a single mom, grew up in a single wide, or actually grew up in a 1900s farmhouse until I was 12, and my mom got a double wide, and that's what I, grew up in. So I say all that to say there's nothing wrong with any of that, but there's no reason that I should be where I'm at besides literally just putting my head down and do it. It's like basically repetition, consistency, basically. And after you do that enough, it's like, hey, anybody can do it. You know what I mean? I hate when people, say, hey, I'm in a bad situation, or this is the reason I'm not successful, or and I'm not saying I am, but I'm just saying, like, there's people use excuses, and I used to, in a sense, kind of lean into that to a degree, and it's like, I mean, at the end of the day, if you want something bad enough, and not to say I believe in, like, what is it called, manifestation or whatever. I don't know if I believe in that because I'm a Christian. I don't know how that works, but I've seen where if I put my mind to something and I think about it and I do it every day, it might not happen exactly like I wanted it, but at the end of the day, it happens. So that's the mind shift change, I guess, knowing anything's possible.
Yeah.
What are some of the common mistakes that you see people make in the business that could possibly run their business into the ground?
Oh, so number one, right off the bat, first off, it's hard for me to say if I had kids, like, because I have kids now, I have two. And I look at guys starting business with kids, and I respect them so much, because back when I started my business, it was me and my wife, and thank God I had her. First off, having a great partner, but she, I'd be gone for 80, 90 hours a week, and come back and I'm paying myself nothing. So it wasn't worth it, right? But the biggest number one I see, and I've seen friends go out of business. I've seen other people I didn't really know that started a business since I have and went out of business. And it all goes back to how they pay themselves. So, for an example, say the business does $10,000 this week, and on a small scale side, you do $10,000 in revenue. You pay yourself $7,000 because, hey, I did well. On a 4-wheeler, on a boat. But then next week you do $2,000, and then the next week you don't make anything, you lose, and then the next week you do $50,000. So what I did, I feel like. And I read books. I don't know exactly where I got it from when I did or why, but I paid myself a salary from day one. And it was like I went from the job I had in Auburn. I was making, this is 2018. The end of 2018. I was making around $1,500 a week. So back then, still good money, but back then really good money. And when I started my business, I was paying myself $450 a week. And I never changed. Literally paid myself $450 a week until like year 2. And it's like, okay, we got some money in the bank. I can give myself a raise. And then I went to $650. And I mean, it was up. I mean, I'll say this. I just now, 6 years in, am about making what I made in Auburn. And but just being disciplined. I can live off this. Because if you start taking away from the business needs all the money for the first 2 to 3. Oh, I'm sorry. But the business needs all the money for the first 2 to 3 years. So as lean as you can be, and I'll say this, a blessing that, I don't want to give anybody excuse that they can't do it, but to give everybody a full picture view, I'm retired from the Marine Corps. So I do get a check from the Marine Corps. So that was kind of like it's not much, but it's one of those things. Okay, at the end of the day, can we still make our bills? Can we still pay our bills and all that off that money? If for some reason we don't get a job for a few months, the biggest mistake I see by far, that people start thinking that the business is going to consistently be whatever they had for the first few weeks, and then they don't get another job, and they've spent the money,
lost the cash flow.
How do you define success in business beyond? Like the money aspect of things? I know a lot of people look at, well, I made this much, so
yeah, I mean,
you seem like you look beyond the cash aspect of it. Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think money does, I used to say 2 things, but really I think it does one thing. I think it exemplifies or magnifies who the person was to start with, right? So if you were not a very good person without money, if you get money, you're gonna be not a really good person with a lot of money.
Yeah.
Same thing. If you're a good person before money, you get money, you're gonna be you're gonna be a good person with a lot of money. So that's how I view money, first off. And then second would be, how do people look at you? How do the people that are around you every day look at you? I mean, I'm sure I got tons of people that don't like me or say I'm wrong, and I'm sorry if that's the case, but I try to do the best I can for the people that depend on me or look up to me, or I'm a leader to, whether that's my wife and my kids or my employees or even clients or contractors we work for. So I guess success, and I thought about it a lot last night. Success to me is, of course, accomplishing goals that you set for yourself, And so, like, you know, if it's to me, and money to me, I look at money like as like, okay, this is, if I can get to this business to a $15 million a year company, that's how I look at money. Not for the money aspect of it, just as far as stepping stones or goals to look at. But if I can get there and then keep the integrity and keep the relationships and be a good human and a good leader to the people around, then that's successful. Like, if whether that's $100,000 a year, you know, and you're an employee of somebody, and that your goal was to get to, you know, a 6-figure salary, and you did that, and you're also a good leader, a good, you know, employee, or good husband and wife, then hey, that's a successful person. Mm-hmm. Or, you know, if you own a business that's $100 million a year and you're not, then I won't say he's very successful, right? And so, you know, I guess that's the best way.
That's good.
To look at success, or the way I do.
Can you walk us through the typical process of finding and securing a concrete job?
Yeah, so it's changed a lot. Of course, we started out word of mouth. Of course, we had a Facebook page, you know, posting pictures and stuff like that. The commercial's a little different than residential, so not to give my secrets away. But so about 2 years ago, don't catch me lying, but about 2 years ago, a guy called me, and he wanted us to bid on some apartments, multifamily slabs, and they were out of Atlanta. We had already done some for a guy, super good friend of mine, Jimmy Futrell, but this other guy called me and said, hey, man, we saw that y'all did this apartment complex. We got one going down the road. And we started hitting it off, and we started talking. Before I knew it, a 10-minute phone call turned into like a 3-hour phone call, and I'd pulled over into Lowe's talking to this guy on the phone. Never met him a day in my life. And he's like, hey, so after talking to you, I'd love to fly you up to Atlanta and, like, meet you face to face. At this point, I've never flown first class, you know, probably have only flown like twice in my life before. And so sure enough, he's like, next Tuesday, you just show up at the airport. I've already paid for the ticket. You know, just tell him your name and where you're going. So he did, flew me first class to Atlanta, which is like a 45-minute flight. So, but anyway, felt important. And I get there, and we go through it. And the guy was in the process. He's a huge general contractor out of Atlanta, and I'm not going to say his name just for, you know, don't want to privacy or anything like that. But he had already, his goal was to be vertically integrated in the next 3 years. And what he meant by that was, he was a general contractor, but he owned a plumbing company in-house. He owned an electrical company in-house, framing company, roofing company. So when they would do these multifamily apartments, he was the GC, and then every other trade he was basically, or had ownership in. And so the only one at that point that he didn't have was concrete. And so after talking to me, he wanted to meet me face-to-face to see if I could potentially be that guy that he could partner with or buy me out, whatever. So he made us an offer, and you know, I mean, at the time, looking back, if you take pride out of it, it was a really good offer. It was a very fair offer. But me, I'm like, no, I'm worth, you know, my business is worth way more than that for what I put into it. And anyways, so I told him no, and he said, well, think about it. And he's like, can I give you some advice? And he's like, at this point, I was doing estimating on like pen and paper, roll out some plans, do all the math on the linear footage of the footers, how much steel, how much concrete. Take me 3 days to do, you know, a pretty good sized commercial job. And so he's like, I respect you not accepting. He's like, but think about it. Call me back in the next few days if your mind changes. But if I'm going to give you the advice, it would be download an estimating software to be legitimate. Like, first off, you need to be pushing out 10 to 20 estimates a week if you want to get to where you want to be. And I'd never had anybody tell me that. And so he's like, I'm going to send a rep down that I use. You know, I'll pay for him to come down. Like, he'll show you just out of goodness of his heart. And so sure enough, he did. He sent a guy down. He showed me this software. We started running it. Man, it took, like I say, it took from 3 days to about 30 minutes on an estimate. And it's like, it's color-coded. I mean, I showed Ethan. It's super cool. Well, what comes with that program is like a database or a project intelligence that's like a Facebook, if you will, for contractors. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it's residential has an application for it, but the commercial. So you can put Bonifay, Florida, and you can do 100 miles around Bonifay, and every commercial job that's coming in the next 90 days to 6 months will be on that job or be on that platform. Yeah. You can click that without contacting the contractor, download the plans, do your own takeoff, and then it has all the contractors that are planning on bidding on its info. So, dude, the first, he sent me that. I would, like, you can ask my wife, but after working the regular week or day, I would go do that program, find a bunch that jobs that I thought were, we would do good at, do a takeoff, send 5 a night, and I was 25, 30 a week. And none of these contractors knew me. None of, didn't know any of them. And I would just send an introductory email. Hey, look, my name's Trace Brannon on Brannon Brothers. Here's a takeoff or a proposal for this slab or this foundation. And again, it kind of went back to the phone calls like I used to make. Yeah. A lot of them, you would never hear anything back, but then every once in a while they would say, hey, nobody else give us a price and you did. So yeah, we want it. It's yours. And then you start doing that and you start getting relationships with these guys. And, now we're at the point we still accept bids and we're still growing, but like we've got 5 or 6 contractors that we work for pretty much every week or every month, and we know they're going to give us the work and they know we're going to meet our end of the deal. And so I don't really have to look for it anymore, but that's how I did find the work,
How do you determine which projects are worth bidding on and which ones you need to pass on?
Ooh, good question. So, first off, I like what we're set up for is big square footage. So, 15, 20,000 square foot plus is what we like to go for. Now you start getting into vertical walls and stuff like that, you can make really good money, and we got good guys that can do that. But I'd say the big square footage, number one, is what we're looking for. And then, like, it goes from there. Like, do I have a relationship with the contractor? If I have a relationship with the contractor, I know I'm going to get paid. Know what they expect. They know what I expect. So on that degree, if said contractor that we work for on a daily basis sends me a job, I'm going to bid it. Because he needs a concrete guy. I don't want him searching for another concrete guy. We're going to do anything he asks us to do. We're going to give him a price that we're going to make money at, but, but as far as like, if I'm just looking out there, access, as far as access to the job site would be a big thing. Access to concrete plants in the area, like Ponce de Leon or like Bethlehem. It's hard. You can bid all the jobs you want, but where's the plants? Where's the concrete coming from? You got to think about that. And so, all that kind of goes into it, but the biggest thing is who the contractor is, what kind of reputation they have, and then making sure that you do a job you're going to get paid for.
What factors go into like calculating a profitable bid?
So typically, what I do, it goes to that program, but I'll do it from footers to rebar, foundation. Long story short, I'll get quantities on all of it, and I know based off my pricing sheets and stuff what each of those items cost me to get. And then I look at, what time of year is it going to be? Because if it's like November through February when it rains every other weekend, you got to have some kind of number in there in case, like, for an example, we dug footers on 850 tile and dug them and they filled up with water. It took 3 weeks to pump them out. $18,000 in labor that you don't figure in, right?
Yeah.
But, so typically I'll get the cost of the job plus with labor in there, and then I have my margins that I know I need to be at for overhead plus profit that I'll throw on top of that. And then it depends on how competitive it is. Like if it's a job that I want us to get and maybe it'll look good, and potential, for other customers or people for us to get that for the brand, I might go down a little bit on that number just to be able to get that job. But I've never looked at, hey, I want to get a job bad enough to lose money on. So, but that's what goes through it. It goes through my mind on stuff like that.
How do you handle the negotiations and getting connections with new contractors?
Yeah, y'all are asking great questions. So, so the first, when you're new into the business, you don't have really any leg to stand on. You're begging for work. So that was hard for me because a lot of these contractors out there, they have generic contracts. So they'll send you a contract and it'll say pay when paid. Well, that's a no-no. But like back then, why is that a no-no now? Because I found out the hard way. But long story short, like you go do a job, you say, I got accounts with concrete companies that are, 30 to 45 day accounts. Well, I can't invoice. Let's say footers, for an example. So if we go out, we dig footers, it takes us a day to dig them. And then we got another day in tying the steel. Then you got a day for an inspection. And then finally you got a day to pour. Well, I've had all that labor cost, all that rebar already in, and then you pour. Well, do we have to pour more or not? If so, I can invoice for a percentage of that job for the footers being done. But that concrete, when the concrete shows up, that day starts the 30 days with them. And so if you can't invoice the day some type of concrete gets poured, you're eating that or you're floating that. And so long story short, on a pay when paid contract, dude, what if they don't get paid? You know, that's what I look at. But the first, when you're new, you don't have much, you know, no leg to stand on, and contractors know that. Now, if I see that, like my operations manager, Dylan, me and him both bounce contracts back and forth to each other and oversee them. I'll go through one, send it to him. Hey, did you see anything that I missed? And he does the same. And basically, I want to be paid within 30 days. And if I don't know you until I get that relationship with you, we're probably going to put in there like a net 15. And so knowing that, which took, hey, having a name and having a reputation, because these contractors call and they want us to do the job. Well, hey, look, not trying to be hard or anything like that, but this is what it requires for us to come out here. And most contractors, if you get with a good contractor, like a legitimate that's not trying to, you know, screw anybody over money, they understand that, hey, you're a young guy, you're starting this business, you don't have a lot of money, this is what I can do, and they'll try to work with you, but some don't, you know. So yeah, the negotiations you learn, and kind of the reputation goes with your ability to negotiate.
Yeah, that was my next question, was going to be, how does like networking and relationships play a role in that kind of thing?
It's huge, man. I mean, in my opinion, and people hate me for this, but I think, but there's like 3 degrees in the college that we have right now, the system of college that we have that matter, and that would be probably like lawyers, doctors, and engineers, right? Yeah. Other than that, you can throw them all away. And so networking to me is the biggest thing on the face of the planet as far as for furthering yourself and success in any, in my opinion, in any aspect of career path you take. Because everything I have or everything I've done is networking, relationships. You know, I can tell you that, like, there's times where a guy can call a concrete company, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong, it just goes into how important networking is. Say you call, you want concrete on Saturday, you got to have it, right? Something pressing, you need to get paid on a job. Well, if you don't have that network or that relationship with that concrete company, they're going to say, bud, we're not opening up. But since I've been working with those concrete companies for a while, you know, hey, bud, hey, I know y'all don't want to open Saturday, but look, this has got to happen, you know, and they know, hey, this guy's going to continue to use us. He's giving us a lot of business, and they open. So that's just one example, but networking is huge, man. It's like I say, that's been probably the most important part of my success is networking.
Well, my dad's always told me is that your network is your net worth.
Absolutely. And it goes back to like the whole thing, like we've always heard growing up. I mean, y'all aren't much younger than me. I'm going to say that to make myself feel better. But it's like who you hang around is who you are, right? It's the same thing in the network. You know, like I want to be around, and this is you kind of get some flack from it from being from Holmes County, and you got to be careful with it because I love where I'm from. I love the people that, you know, I grew up around. So, and I don't mean, I never want to in any way offend anybody that I grew up with, but I want to be around people that I want to be like, right? Yeah. So and it's the rule of average, and I say that a lot. I think I talked to you, Ethan, about it back when we were pouring that slab. But and I learned this out in Phoenix, Arizona at a business summit. But the rule of average is, you know, if I look at maybe where I'm from, prosperity, I'm really successful, right? There's like 4 people from prosperity. You know what I mean? Like I'm the only one that owns a business in prosperity, right? But no, but if I go to, you know, Tallahassee or to Atlanta, and I'm like, hey, look at my concrete company. How successful are we? Oh, well, you know, there's 7 other companies doing $100 million a year. You're only doing 8. Okay, you're not very successful. And so that goes into that, you know, the network is like, and I'm not saying you have to be around people that are successful all the time. Like I turkey hunt, that's my favorite thing to do. I turkey hunt with guys who have jobs, that don't have jobs, who have businesses, that don't have businesses, and I love them. I love those guys. And so it's not like that. But as far as on the professional aspect of it, Monday through Friday or Monday through Saturday, I want to be calling people and having conversations with people that are talking about, where they want to be. And so, yeah, we can talk about where we grew up and have those conversations with people, but the growing mindset and having that, I guess, track to success would be around people you want to be like, because you're going to learn from them. Like I want to be the dumbest guy in the room every time I go, because the dumbest guy in the room is going to be smart.
He's got a lot to learn.
Yeah. If you're the smartest guy in the room, you have nothing to learn. Yeah. You're teaching everybody else. I don't, and there's times for that, but for me, I want to be the dumbest guy.
Yeah. I like that.
Have you ever underbid a job, and what did you learn from that experience?
Not on purpose, right? But let me see. I don't think I've ever underbid a job, like as far as, I'm sure I have. I'm just not thinking of it. I think I probably bid the job pretty tight, and then weather or something happened, and then have we lost money on a job? Yes. But underbid, I don't think I've ever underbid a job, and I'll probably walk out of here and remember that I did. But as of right now, no.
How does cash flow management factor into deciding which jobs and how many jobs you need? And
Absolutely. So we try to have, if cash flow is a big deal, no, let me back up. Cash flow is a big deal. So let's just say there's a more profitable job, but the cash flow aspect of it is like, let's say net 45, net 60. We'll look at that hard first. Like, do we even want to sign a contract with that? And then how much manpower is it going to take, right? So that being said, let's say we go after it. We get that job. So it's we're going to profit 40% on this job, but it's going to take 60 days from the day we invoice to get paid. Now I'm looking at when's that job start, and what are these other little jobs that we might not necessarily profit a lot of money on that are cash flowing fast. So that way, these little jobs can make up for help float this one.
Yep.
And so that's how I look at that, like on a cash flow aspect. And I mean, there's jobs that I've missed, man. Like this is where people go bankrupt, because there's guys that they have the ambition, they have the drive, and they'll see a job and they're like, oh man, this is the opportunity, and they have the opportunity to get the job, but they're not real with where they're at. Mm-hmm. And I've been in that same place, and I've been blessed to get out of it or figure out a way, but you've got to be real with where you're at financially before you start going after those bigger jobs that the cash flow is, net 30 past. I mean, you got to be careful, man. You can, and that's where you start seeing fights. That's where you start seeing courts. That's where you start seeing people not enjoying each other. Employee doesn't like the boss, and then boss doesn't like the employee, because everybody has so much pressure. And it's based off one person not just being legitimate with themselves on saying, hey, man, because, I can just, like, for an example, if I go after a big job that I'm not going to be able to get paid on for 60 days and I don't have the money to cash flow to get to that point, all my guys, I'm asking them to show up, Monday through Friday to work. And then on Friday, I can't pay them a check, or they'll say I can for a few weeks, but until that check comes in, I can't. Well, they're not going to be mad at the contractor for not paying me. Their deal was with me. Yeah. And so I should have been more realistic with myself and say, hey, look, you don't have the ability to be able to flow this job. And then you get mad at the contractor. Yeah, it's like, oh, contractor, you whatever, you didn't pay me. Well, it's like, no, look, it's in black and white. This is when I told you I was going to pay you. So it just makes a bad situation. So, yeah.
How do you handle managing multiple jobs at once?
I'll take my hat off and show you I ain't got no hair. I'm bald. But no, so that was in the last 6 to 8 months, I've started really focusing on that aspect of the business. So first off, like I said to start with, I don't know what I'm doing half the time. It's a learning process every day. But putting good guys in place that, that's a lot of people I see from around here that are in business. And again, no like disrespect if it's all about what you want to do. For me, I want to leave something after I'm done, right? And so I don't want this business to die when I die. And So that goes into trusting people, and a lot of people have problem trusting employees, trusting anybody, and I mean I do too. But it's if you want to be successful, you're going to have to find people that you can trust to do a job that you put them in place. And that goes into paying guys. You want a guy that you can trust that's going to do what you want him to do. You got to pay him a lot of money. And I've got now, thank God, I've got two really, really solid guys that are my managers, like day to day. And I've got some up and coming guys that, recently hired that, if they keep doing what they're supposed to and stay on the right track, that, they'll be where they're at. So they help me, run the day to day jobs. I more or less get the jobs, and, if there is an issue, I'll step in and handle it.
How do you ensure quality control while keeping multiple projects going at one time?
I mean, it goes back to employees. So, I mean, like, you got to have employees that care about what they're doing first and foremost. And then always, I mean, I guess it goes back into the what I call acting contractor mode. Like, you see the guys that get a business and say they start getting a little bit of success. They get the polo and they get the brown hard hat and the nice truck, and they start riding around, but then they stop actually checking on the jobs, and they stop. And I never want to be that way. Don't get me wrong. I've got people that I pay a lot of money to do that, and I've got people that make a lot of money in the field to do a good job. But at the end of the day, my name's still on the hat. My name's still on the business. And so I try my best to be as intentional on, at the end of the day, these guys are paying me to do the job. Brannon Brothers, me, Trace. So, and then at some point, I try to be at every one of our big pours. If we have a pour that's over 10,000 square feet, I try to be at any pour, but definitely jobs that are over 10,000 square feet, I try to be there. And then if there's an inspection or meeting for an inspector, I try to be there just to let them know, like, look, this is important to me, as is important to y'all. And so that's going back to the quality control. And like I say, like, there was a time 2 or 3 years ago when my guys were having issues leaving trash on a job. I mean, and it sounds like I'm kind of a butt, but I couldn't get them to understand, like, hey, you can't do this, man. You might pour the best slab on the face of the planet, but you got Coke cans and, cigarette butts everywhere. People are going to look at that first. And so I started telling them, like, look, I'm going to start charging y'all like $50 every piece of trash that I pick up. And I'm splitting it but amongst if that was y'all's crew, y'all figure it out. It's getting $50 out of y'all's check, and hey, it fixed it. I never had to do that, but that's, being intentional would be the quality control. This is what I put out. I'm not here for the money. I'm here for the long haul. Of course, money makes the business go round and makes the world go round, but we're here to, leave a legacy of, I don't want me to pour a house slab and have to hide from them in Walmart because we did a bad job, right? Yeah, that's not the life I want to live.
What do you think is the most important quality a contractor can have?
Honesty, integrity. I think that's the biggest thing I've seen. And kind of touching on that, I just went and got my contractor's license. We were talking about that. So that's another avenue in the future we're about to kind of go down. But the reason I did get my contractor's license is because here lately, and I'm not dropping any names, but now you get down south of I-10 down towards the beach, there's some good guys that have been doing it for a while that have good reputations. And there's guys up here that have too. But it goes back to what I was talking about, being honest with yourself, and honest with what your ability is. And so I don't think any contractor ever gets a job or does a job and with the intention of screwing someone else over, right? I don't think maybe that's me looking at the good in people, but I don't think there's anybody intentionally ever is supposed to or trying to scam anybody. What happens is they're not honest with themselves, either on the ability or the financial side to be able to do it. And then they get somebody involved on their, like, let's say a house, for an example. You go and sign a contract to build someone's house. That's the biggest purchase they're probably ever going to make, right? Yeah. And that's something they're going to be proud of. They're going to tell everybody about. And so if you go in and you treat it like that, and from day one the communication stays, exactly how it should. There's issues, you bring them up right when there are issues. Hey, if it's your fault, you tell them. Don't try to hide it or blame it on someone else. And go through, hey, this is how we're going to take payment. This is how we're going to pay. This is how much I'm going to make. I'm up front with people like that. Like, look, your job, let's say it's $20,000. I'm going to make $5,000. And so they know up front. And if they don't want to do business with me, they think I'm making $5,000 is too much. That's fine. But I'm not going to do it. And in the end, you think I'm raping you or I'm, whatever. I'm not going to do that. So honesty, I guess, number one. And then, like I say, it goes back into, then they say an issue happens. Well, they don't want to admit that they made a mistake because that makes them look bad. Well, then now that mistake you start lying. And that lie goes on and on and on. And then towards the end, you've built them a house that's what they've got to live in. They have no other option, but now they hate you. And, what is it they say? If you do 10 good things, maybe one person will say it, but if you do one bad thing, 5 people are going to, or however it is, or the old saying. But that's what I feel like. That's why I'm getting into the contract. And it's kind of to restore, a little bit of faith into home building or, into the contract in and of itself.
Yeah, I like what you said about the people the contractors, they're most of the time not going to be going in there trying to scam people. And if they are, their business is very quickly going to get ran into the ground.
Absolutely.
And it's very evident through people who have made that mistake.
Absolutely.
But something else you had talked about is issues on a job site. And how do you deal with unexpected delays and issues?
So, give me an example of one, just so I know, because there's
like you were talking about earlier, with weather comes in,
Okay.
footers are flooded.
Okay, so to prevent that, like we had an issue. We started the Kinston job addition, new gym and storm shelter for Kinston High School, and same thing. Like the original plan was to pour Monday yesterday. We had started digging Thursday. Well, then we checked the radar, and it's supposed to rain Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay, hold up. We've already dug footers. I need to send another crew in here. Let's go ahead and get the steel in. Now I got to call the structural engineer, call the contractor, the superintendent on site, then call the architect, because that's what happens in a commercial job. You got to get all these parties involved. Hey, look, this is what we're doing. I know in the pre-construction meeting, y'all told us we need to give y'all 3 days of advance before an inspection, but we don't have 3 days. Mm-hmm. And so what do I need to do in order to get this inspection done on Thursday or this is Wednesday, so on Friday to be able to pour this Friday afternoon to beat the rain? And, these guys are very professional. So, they handled it well. They're like, yeah, we'll be out there. They made it happen. They got us the inspections. I sent an extra crew out there. We poured it, got it done. So that's how I handled that. But then going back to the one that the weather did hit, that's at the end of the day, it's my fault. I thought I had leadership in the position to understand, like, kind of you can do it partial to get what you can done. But that was my fault that it didn't get done. I put somebody in place that may not made a mistake. And, at the end of the day, I'm the one that's got to eat it. So you can't, that goes back into the finances. Like, thank God we're in a position to where we have a little bit of money or a little bit of access to money. So in the situation like that, yeah, we're eating it, but you can't, like, we can eat it now and worry about it later, rather than if you didn't have any money to start with, that could have been really ugly. Because it's like, I can't keep sending guys out here to fix a mistake that I made because I don't have the money to pay them for that mistake. Mm-hmm. And so, you got to get a job. At the end of the day, you got to get the job done. So send them out there, get it done, cry later, and that's how we handle that situation.
How do you go about hiring your workers and finding good help?
Man, you tell me. Construction's one of those things that it's pretty tight-knit group across the board, but I've found I do want guys with experience, right? Who doesn't? But trying to find guys who have specialized in concrete is really hard. Definitely commercial concrete. Plus, that aren't either very old or, are on their own businesses, right? So what I do is now I look for mindset. Like, definitely in the manager roles, I want a guy who has some pride, cares about what he's doing, wants to be the best. And whether he's doing that as a landscaper right now or, the last guy I hired, Kyle had ran a crew over the state forestry. So, he understood how to manage. And at the end of the day, he couldn't take like he couldn't take, oh, I did a really good job. No, it's still the forestry's thing. So it's not about, I don't want guys that they want the credit. I want guys that do it because at the end of the day, you know, that's just what they're supposed to do, you know, and that's what I look for, I guess, in an employee is finding a guy who is going to do the right thing behind closed doors, and I can train the concrete into them. You know, that's what I've been doing here lately that's worked.
What advice would you give to someone wanting to start their own contracting business?
Contracting or concrete?
Just contracting in general.
Contracting in general.
Whether that's subcontracting.
Okay. First off, I mean, do it. Like, I think the what is it? The enemy of entrepreneurship is perfection. So if you wait for the perfect time, it's never, you know, you're never going to start anything. Long story short, do it first off. You know, you got to have some kind of skill. You got to know what you want to be doing or what it is. But like, say if you're a plumber, you know, if you have some kind of skill in plumber, I wouldn't recommend doing something that required, let's say, a state license right to start with, because unless you have that, great. But do something like frame and concrete, or even sub for a person that has that. That'd be number one. Figure out something you're good at or you like doing, and then, I mean, just doing it small. Like, don't be in a hurry. Do what you can do. Figure out what works and what doesn't work, or figure out a niche that, you know. Like, for an example, like a great friend of mine, Chance House, owns S&H Concrete Pumping. You know, that's an awesome gig. You know, he got a line pump. That's how they got started. Started pumping concrete through a line pump, and then, you know, graduated up. That's a niche that, you know, he found and he was able to excel in. And so there's no specific thing that, hey, this is what you got to do to be successful. It's figuring out what people need or what there is a need, doing it, and just being true to yourself. And then as far as being honest, like doing the whole money thing, don't pay yourself too much. Do it. Don't let it get exciting and, oh, I want a new boat or I want a new four-wheel. I got an extra $1,000. You got to be straight. If that's what you want to do. Now, if you're just doing it for extra money, do whatever you want to, but just be disciplined and have a goal. And then, you know, I like setting a huge goal that seems unrealistic, and then I like setting goals that seem more realistic, and then kind of go to them.
What are some misconceptions about whether it's contracting, subcontracting, concrete industry, things like that? I
think misconception is everybody thinks you make a lot of money, and then everybody thinks that you're a scam artist. It goes back to but I mean, it's kind of rightfully so, right? Stereotypes are stereotypes for a reason, yeah. And so, I mean, like I say, misconception. Like you tell somebody you do $2 million, and they're, holy smokes, you know, Trace does $2 million. He's worth $2 million. No, absolutely not. You know, yeah. And then you look at profit margin. They want to do quick math and say, oh, okay, you made 20% on $2 million. No, you know, there was breakdowns. There was cost. So the money aspect is a big misconception. You know, the real cost. You know, a lot of people like to say they make a lot of money, but when it gets down to brass tacks, it's not really there. And then, like, of course, vehicles and tax write-offs. Construction is one of those things you can write off a lot. So, you know, if you look at, I like to say, don't look at what I'm driving or anything like that, because that's probably the reason I bought that was because I didn't want to, you know, have to pay in a whole lot of money if I can write it off. Not that I own that or had that kind of money, but so that's a misconception. And then, like I say, to go back on that scam artist, because so many people aren't honest and aren't transparent, it's made a bad reputation for the most part and definitely in residential, because there's not a lot of money to be made. And so if people are more honest and upfront with what stuff costs and what it costs to get the job done, I think the everyday people would understand that no, they're not really out to screw you, and they're just trying to do a job to, you know, make money for their family. So. But it goes back into doing what you say you're going to do. You can't fault a person for talking bad about you because you did, in a sense, tell them you were going to do something that you didn't do. So it's a two-way street.
So we're going to transition into personal life and hobbies and stuff like that. How do you balance work with family life?
Oh, my wife would tell you not very good. No, man. So the first part of the business, I didn't do a very good job at all. And yeah, I give my wife all the credit. You know, we had at start with, we had one small kid. Now we have two, and she was having to balance that. And also she does payroll for the company. So she, on Thursday she's doing that. So for me, it was having a good spouse was what helped me balance it. And then, so like my wife, number one, is how I balance it, give her all the credit on that. But now that the business is kind of where I can step back to some degree, being intentional with it, like I try to, I don't know, man, having kids changes everything. And like the love that I have for my kids, and the father I want to be, I might be sitting on the computer knowing I have to do an estimate, but I'm thinking in my mind, like, hey, my son hasn't seen me all day. So I can't get mad at him when he comes to interrupt me. Take a break, go enjoy your son. When he goes to bed, if it's that important, you come back out and work. And so that's a big deal to me is, I don't want my son to ever think I'm too busy for him. Right. Yeah. And so that's how I guess I try to balance, is being very intentional and thinking about it. But at the front, I was terrible.
How's being a father changed and shaped who you are, I guess?
Oh man, 100%. I mean, like, you just don't. You can make risky moves when you're not a father. Like you can take risk. You can upset somebody, or you can get in a fight, or whatever it takes. It doesn't matter if something happens to Trace and I ain't got kids. Nobody life really is affected. Now I'm not only his protector or his leader. I'm what I need. I'm his example, right? So if I'm mad and I let a little cuss word slip or something like that, and he's in the back seat, well then, hey, maybe he thinks that's okay, and that's not the kind of I wanna be a very good example to what kind of man I want him to be. And I think that's looking at our generation and the society as today. It's because there's not enough fathers that really, even the ones that are there, they're not even thinking about being intentional of an example. And I'm not good at it, not great at it, but I try to. I try to take him to the job sites when I can. I try to, take him hunting as much as I can. And I know at the end of the day, I know we're not going to kill anything. And I know at a job site, he's not really learning anything, but just being around it and letting him see his dad be a leader and how I treat people and, stuff like that. That's how I want him to treat people,
Do you have any personal goals outside of the business that you're working on?
So that's hard. Personal and business for me is pretty hand in hand. But I want to be able to, the business to be where it's at, great. But like personally, I want to be able to provide and leave a legacy for not only my kids now, but like generations. And it's like, I think I saw a podcast or a video, a guy was like, who is the it in your family? I think is what the guy was explaining. It's like, or the one. And it's like, that's what I want to be for and I mean, that kind of goes in with business, but for me personally, I want to be the one that, 10 generations from now, they won't know me, they'll see pictures, but like, hey, he sacrificed, he put his head down, he grinded, and now our legacy, our family legacy has changed because of that one. And I guess that's my goal. And that I don't know if you could say financial or just respect or being good to people, whatever. At the end of the day, like I say, the way I look at money is we're stewards to it. God gives us opportunities to do things, whether it's money or positions or what. And so if I can be a steward and show my family how to be a good steward of financial gain, if that's what God wants me to have, then that's what I want to do personally, is be able to take care of community, family, and people that need it.
So you've mentioned hunting a few times. I know you're a big turkey hunter.
Absolutely.
What do you enjoy most about turkey hunting?
Man, so when I grew up in Holmes County, and turkey hunting, we didn't even have a turkey season until I was 16. Because I guess all the rednecks around here had killed all the turkeys. So they had repopulated them, and I think I was 15 or 16 when they opened the first season, and it was like for 3 or 4 days, and you could only kill one bird. And so that being said, like, my grandpa is the only person that really taught me how to hunt. He didn't grow up having turkeys, so he didn't know how to turkey hunt, but he knew where some turkeys were. So he'd go, sit me in the woods or something like that, but he didn't know how to call them. So I'd watch like primos on TV and try to figure out what sound to make. And so, long story short, man, I just learned the hard way and had kind of good men in the community that took me hunting when they didn't have to. And so I was able to kind of fall in love with it that way. And I guess the easy answer is it's I like to deer hunt, I like to bass fish, but turkey hunting is one of those things that's so interactive. You know what I mean? It's you like literally this past Saturday was youth season, and we took my son, my buddy's son, both of them are 4, and then his oldest son who's 9. So we had all 3 of those in the woods, plus me and him, and they're squirming around, and you call and shoot, a gobbler hammers on it, and they just all freeze because they've never heard that, and you see it in their face, and they're like, okay, I know what Dad's talking about. And then all of a sudden you see the turkey, and he comes running in, and they're all locked in. Like the whole time we're like, stop moving. But now they've seen it, and so they're in it. And then his son was able to, kill the turkey, and we get to celebrate and jump and run around and build up the emotion. And there it is. And it's like that's what I love about it. It's like somebody who maybe is on the fence about whether they like hunting or not. Like you can take them turkey hunting, and they're like, oh man, like this is.
As soon as it hammers back there.
Oh, dude. I mean, like it rattles your chest. Definitely if he's right there on you. So, yeah, I mean, and it's quick. Like being a business owner, like the thing about deer hunting for me that I don't necessarily like is like if I'm sitting still for too long, I'm thinking about what I could be doing. And so turkey hunting, it's if I go to a field and he's not gobbling, or I go to a place and he's not gobbling, I'm going to get back in the truck and I'm going to work.
Yeah.
But if I open the door and he's hammering on it, hey, we going after him,
Has hunting taught you anything about business or gave you any lessons in that?
Patience, I guess, would be a big one. And then like what really matters in life. I mean, like a lot of times, like when I get really, really stressed or something like that, or need a break, maybe get in an argument with someone, either an employer or contractor, or even a spouse, you can go walk in the woods and kind of leave the phone in the truck and just decompress and just walk and look at God's creation and look at, hey, you might not even kill a turkey. Like I was telling somebody the other day, like I just like just being out there. I might my wife hates turkey season because I'll leave, but like I'll go on a Saturday and go turkey hunting that morning. I'll carry some sandwiches with me and some water, and I might not kill one that morning, but then I'll start looking for airheads, and then I'm just walking and looking and listening, and then you might strike one up, and you get on him, and it works out or it doesn't, and it's just. Hunting in general to me is just my time, I guess. Like I've had more church in the woods, I guess, than I would say or I guess more closeness with God, more or less, than in church, I would say. Not no offense to church, but like you know what I mean. Like you can have me and God. I can be like, this is beautiful, or hey, this is what's on my mind, or you got time, and that's what I enjoy.
Yeah, it's just you and him. You ain't got no distractions.
Exactly.
You get to really appreciate His creation.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely, like you say, a turkey. Like, man, turkey comes in. You're talking to him. He's coming in, and it just works out like it's supposed to. And like definitely a kid, or like I don't know if y'all have kids, but when you do, it's like you get to see your son, and he enjoys in the excitement. Like my son killed his first deer this year, and it's just like, dude. I was almost in tears. He didn't. I mean, he was excited, but like I'm like, oh my God, it's dried up. But it's like, dude, full circle,
How has your faith in God guided you through tough times?
Okay, yeah. So that's going back to the Marines. That was a really tough time for me, man, because I got really close to God right before the Marine Corps. Because like me and my wife, we were dating before the Marines, but I hadn't known her very long, so we had kind of, cut it off right before I was going to go because it was going to be a long time of training and all that. And so, man, I was leading little men's devotion there by the house, and praying, having reading the Bible 3 or 4 times a day, and got just like I say, closest I've probably ever been to God right before the Marines, and go in the Marine Corps, and it's rough, man. I mean, it's boot camp is what they say it is. I mean, it's a lot more mental than it is physical, but going through that and just kind of make it one more day, kind of make it chow to chow, however you want to look at it. But I'm in the same aspect. I felt like I was killing it. I was doing a really good job, and then all of a sudden, boom, you get hurt. And it's like, hold up. Trace has been, not to say I was the best at everything, but Ponce Leon, if you're halfway decent at baseball, you're the best baseball player at Ponce Leon. You know what I mean? And I'm sure that's how it is a lot of these schools. And so, you feel like you're the man to a degree. And then you go to a place like Paris Island, you realize, hey, you're not there. Every one of these guys were the men at their place. But I was doing really good. I was a leader in my platoon. And so I was like, okay, maybe I am a naturally good leader. And then all of a sudden, boom, you get hurt. And the world changes, and there's nothing you can do about it. Nobody could help it. It wasn't like I quit, just boom, injured. And so it was like, okay, God, I've trained for over a year for this situation, and I'm hurt. Why? So you start questioning, why, God? Why? Are you even real? Like, is God even a real thing? Or and I started questioning crazy stuff, man, and like looking into other religions to see, if like maybe I was just born in Holmes County, so that's all I've ever learned, Well, so I started like digging into the Bible, and I was like, look, God, if I'm gonna find a flaw in this, like, and I'm not gonna believe in the Bible, I'm not gonna be a Christian, I'm gonna find a flaw. And so, dude, like I said, that was the only book I had, and I read it from cover to cover. I read it 3 times in that stint I was in the Marine Corps, and I couldn't find one flaw. And it was like so crazy to me, because I called myself a Christian, but I'd never read the Bible, right? And not to shame anybody for that, but how do you, like, I can't call myself a contractor if I never took the test and get the license. So how can I call myself a Christian if I've never looked at the book? And so I went through it, and man, it was everything about the Bible that I still, and I'm not in it as much as I probably should now, but everything I still love about the Bible is so applicable to today's world. And that's what, I think you can't argue with, is like, that was however many years ago, and the lessons and the stories and the parables and all. It's like, dude, you go through a hard situation, go read a verse that goes through that, and it's like, okay, there's your answer. Mm-hmm. And it's like, to me, that was what got me back on track. And then it was just like, I feel like at the darkest of times in someone's life and in anybody's life, that's when God's light shines the brightest, right? Like when things are good, not to say God's light's not shining, but it's hard to see it, because you're like, oh, I'm the man. Yeah. But when you're in that dark time, that's when God's light shines the brightest. And it's like, to me, that's what happened. And it was then trying to stay, once I got out of that and my life did start kind of going up, and taking the opportunities God was giving me, it was like trying to stay true and remember that, like, hey, God can take it away just as quick as he can give it, and, being as true to that. And then also trying to connect to people, because like, I don't want to connect to people like in church, if that makes sense. Like, not to say I do, but like, I want to connect to people here, because the script, I heard a podcast, and I forget who it was, but the guy said the Bible God meets you where you're at, right? And I feel like as Christians, sometimes we judge people on where they're at. Even though we're praying for their destination, you're judging them for where they're at, and it's like, hey, let's love them there, let's find them there. And so if I, like in construction, I can do that. And I might not come out and say, hey, look, man, read the Bible, or, hey, I'm a Christian, like right off the start, but I want to connect to him as a good, and I know good works doesn't give us to heaven, but I want to connect to him on that good works, that, hey, I'm a good guy. I'm a good person. I'm going to treat you respectfully. And then as our relationship kind of builds, hey, I'm a good guy because what? I'm a Christian, and because I believe in God, and that's my moral background and my purpose. Yeah. I can't have a purpose without having a purpose with Jesus, and that aspect. And so that whole aspect, I said a lot, but that kind of goes into the whole aspect of business. I can't do y'all a good job if I don't have a moral compass, and I can't. Y'all can't trust me to do what I say I'm going to do if I don't have a moral compass. And where does my moral compass come from? Jesus.
Yeah. How do you incorporate your beliefs into your business?
Yeah, it's kind of same answer, but it's tough, man. It's definitely tough in 2025, because you don't know what people do believe that work for you, and you got to be careful to a degree. So, I just tell people straight up, if I buy the guys dinner or something like that, or buy the guys lunch, we're going to pray. Now, you don't have to, like, it's not, if you're not a Christian or you don't want to believe in that, or you feel offended by that, that's fine. But, I'm going to pray for us. And then as far as, like I say, being good to people, loving everybody. You know, there's guys that are gonna show up late because them and our old lady had an argument or something personally was going on, and it's like, I'm not gonna fire you because of that. You know, like having a little grace, you know, in certain situations, but then also knowing that, you know, as Jesus would leave the 100 to find the one. I can't do that in business, right? I can't leave the 99 to go find the one, but having that same mindset of, hey, I would be willing to, and here's why, stuff like that. You know, that's how I put my values into it. And, you know, I never want to screw anybody over a contractor. Like if I feel like, don't get me wrong, there's times I got to go to contractors and be like, hey man, can you help me out here? Can you pay me a little advance? And, you know, just being appreciative of it and, you know, doing what you say you're going to do so they can trust you and, you know, be able to help you out. And then also remembering that and be able to help them out when you can, or help somebody else out when you can.
Yeah, I like what you had said about showing grace to your employees, because oftentimes what I think about when I'm talking to people or just when I'm interacting with people, if I don't show them grace, then who am I so worthy that the Father can, but I can't?
Absolutely.
And that's something that I'm convicted of a lot, and it's just it changes your mindset when you start showing grace how the Father shows grace.
Absolutely. And it's honestly, as leaders, not to say, and I think you can go overboard with this, because I call some contractors, they have like a God complex where they think they're God, right? But when you're a leader to some degree, you kind of got to act. Oh, I mean, God asked us to walk like Jesus. That's the goal, is to be like Jesus. But you've kind of got to act like not God, but like an example of what God would be in your business, because like there's times where you got to be stern. There's times where, you know, the wrath, you know, like it's like the wrath of God or something. You've got to, hey, these are what our rules, and we're not making exceptions to our rules. But, you know, here's the grace part. Here's the, you know, we're here to help you. You know, yeah, this is a business. We're here to make money. You know, that at the end of the day, that's what a business is. But, you know, we're also here to help people along the way and be stewards of that money that we make. And so, like you said, grace is the biggest thing. And I think grace and patience would be the two biggest things from Scripture to business, I think would go hand in hand.
What are your future goals for Brannon Brothers or your other endeavors you have?
Yeah, so Brannon Brothers, I'm hoping, you know, for it to grow, maybe twice the size it is now. That would be the goal right now. And I see it happening. I see, Lord willing, that we can get it to that point. I kind of see the light. The contracting business, the first original reason I went after the contracting license is because in the state of Florida, concrete doesn't require a license. Like, you can go start a concrete business without any kind of specialty license. Not that I agree with that. I'm glad it was like that for me to start. But like, honestly, if a roofer needs a roofing license, a concrete definitely needs a concrete, or, you know, foundation license, because that's everything the house is built on. And so, that being said, I got a lot of like looks, or like maybe felt judged on a way of like, hey, you're just a concrete guy. So there was kind of some pride there of like, hey, all right, well, yeah, I don't necessarily need a license, but I'll go get the biggest one that they allow me to get. And so I went and did that. And then kind of, that's the plan. The plan for the contracting business, it's going to be Delta Bow Contract, and that's my kids' names, my daughter and my son. Do, you know, custom homes upwards of 500 to $1.5 million. Like dollar homes is our goal there. I like that niche of like being able to do extremely nice custom homes, and I really don't want to advertise it. It kind of work with customers that like it just works out. Kind of, I'm not going to go search for a customer and have a bad experience. I don't want them to have a bad experience. So, and we don't need to. You know, we got the concrete business going on. So if it works out that we get a good customer and they want to trust us and we can trust them, then we'll do that. But then I guess the next biggest thing coming down the pipeline is we're starting an underground utility company. And hopefully in the next 2 to 6 months, I would say, you know, depending on how the licenses and all go. And I'm excited about that. I've got two good friends that are going to be partners in that, and they're new to business. So not to say I know more than them on that aspect. They know a lot more than me on other aspects, but kind of get to show them the freedoms of being a business owner and the problem solving ability and stuff. So I'm excited. I'm really excited about that.
Yeah. What kind of legacy do you want to leave behind?
Man, so it's pretty simple. I talk too much, so it might go further than that. But like I remember my grandpa, he went to Ponce de Leon. He played basketball in 1954, I think. But I remember, from I don't know, second grade to senior year, somebody asked you like who your parents were, who your family was, and they're like, Ronnie Scott's your grandpa, and I'm like, yeah, and they're like, dude, he was a great man. He could play basketball, but he was a great human. That's about as good as they come. And so I mean, that's what I like. Take money out of it, take success out of it. Like to me, talking about success, like I want to leave a legacy that not only my son, but or anybody, like if once I'm dead and gone, hey, Trace Brannon was a great guy. That's like he did it the best he could, or he would always go above and beyond for me, or he would reach out to help this person there. That's the legacy I want to live. Is that was good husband, good father, and good to the community. That's for right now. That's what I got.
If you could go back to say the day you started the concrete company, what's one thing you would tell yourself? Piece of advice you'd tell yourself?
Man, ooh, I never thought of that, man. One piece of advice I would think about or tell myself: don't worry, trust. Like God's got it and you got it. Like just keep going, because there's so many times that you're like, why am I doing this, or am I an idiot? Like what lies tomorrow? And I mean, like, dude, the original goal when I started this, and my wife will tell you, I told her if we can build a house, like pay for a house from this business, like it would be successful. And we did that 3 years ago. So it was like, you know what I mean? Like that was it. Like, that was the goal, was like, hey, build a house off the money we make off this business, and I've made it. And so now it's like that transitions like, hey, I guess the biggest thing now, it's not the answer to that question, but the best feeling now to me is getting to see, I got 24 employees now. And like we have Christmas parties and we have Thanksgiving deals, and we'll have cookouts during the summer. But getting to see 24 families' lives changed or in a way bettered because of an idea I had when I was 21, 22 years old. Like a little idea that could have blown away with the next conversation, that now 24 families get an opportunity to better themselves by working for me. Mm-hmm. And that's super cool, that they get to buy. They bought in, and they do the work. Like I don't even like to consider them employees. Like that's what we have to call them. But they bought into a dream that I had, and now I get to be a orchestrator of that, and that they depend on me. And I that's what keeps me motivated. That's what I look back and I'm like, dude, that's what it's for. Like when I sign checks on Friday, I tell myself there's never been a Friday. We pay every week. There's never been a Friday in going on 6-7 years that we've ever missed payroll, and it's like that's why I do it. Those guys. So.
Yeah, that's good. What's one final piece of wisdom you'd like to leave with everyone?
There's a couple. I mean, I would say, but to end it would be similar to I was talking about the enemy of entrepreneurship is perfection. Like, don't sell yourself too short. Like anyone can do anything they put their mind to. It's just, you got to step and you got to go. You know what I mean? Like believe in yourself, do it, figure it out along the way, I guess would be my one piece. Is because looking back at it, I can't tell you how many times it was like, do I need to do it? Can I do it? When am I going to do it? It's not right now. And I've talked to friends that, still are on that verge of like, entrepreneurship or starting their business, and it's like, why haven't you started? Well, man, I'm waiting on this, or I'm waiting to be debt free, or I'm waiting. It's like, dude, if you start now, it don't have to be there. Start, and figuring it out along the way. The last one, there was a guy, he said the difference between a business professor and a business owner, as the business owner started and the business professor is waiting for perfection. So he's teaching it. He's teaching perfection and how the business is supposed to work. But the business owner did it. And what's the difference is he started and the other guy's waiting for perfection.
Mm-hmm. That's really good. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Absolutely.
We really appreciate it.
I appreciate y'all inviting me. I think y'all have got big things coming for both of y'all.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank
It's cool to see.